All right, everybody, welcome back to the Steam Zone for another week of salacious headlines. I'm coming to you from Brooklyn, New York, where the helicopters are circling overhead. Another week, another incident on the streets out here. Ben this week was out in Washington. But he's right back with us now.
All those selfies you see, they were just from the outside. I went in and had meetings at Congress, at the White House right after. Don't worry. I just didn't get photos of those. It's like the Canadian cousin. I just don't have proof. Or it's the Canadian girlfriend, not Canadian cousin.
It's sort of
maybe
like,
for some that's in the South, but we'll get to that later. Exciting time. Let's dive in, Noah.
You were taking the children that you don't yet have on their spring break trip to Washington, or summer break. I don't even know where we're at. Well, the good news, Ben, is that some things change, but some things stay exactly the same. Why we've been hitting the last 2 weeks, our lead story has been AI, US AI action plan, China AI action plan. So why change a good thing, Ben? Let's lead off with what's leading the news. It's AI, AI, AI. Did you see what the big AI giants have offered the American government?
No, but I'm sure it's free.
Close, Ben, close, but not quite. Let's tell this story in 3 parts. Part 1. A few days ago, we see on August 5th, Anthropic, the story breaks, Anthropic is going to sell the government Claude. Claude, it's AI chatbot, it's LLM, for $1. Anthropic wants to sell Claude for $1, Ben. How much do you pay for your monthly Claude subscription, Ben?
No comment.
So, not to be outdone, what happens? OpenAI comes into the mix, providing ChatGPT to the entire federal workforce for $1 to each agency. Ben, how many people do you think work at an individual federal agency?
I don't know, post-Doge or pre-Doge? Good question, right?
Yeah, pre or post, I'll tell you what, it is a hell of a lot more than 0, which would make this number undefined. Therefore, these American bureaucrats are about to get flooded with LLMs for the low price of very, very close to free. What the hell is going on here, Ben?
I mean, there's a lot of interesting incentives going on here, right? There is... You want to gain share. This is a tried and true thing in Silicon Valley. You offer your stuff as free. And that's something you need to be able to do. But, it is a little risky, I think, for the buyer to accept. There's no such thing as a free lunch is something we learned in our undergraduate education at U Chicago. I think Milton Friedman said that. So a little worried.
Okay. So let's break this down, right? We've got the 2 behemoths. I mean, Meta has Llama, which is open source, so that was kind of always free. But you got these other 2 big players. Google probably not going to be too far behind. Is there value, Ben, in these companies offering their products for damn close to free to the U.S. government?
Yeah, I think it's real, it's clear value for the providers, which is they're going to get everyone hooked on it. And it's clear value initially for the government, which is you're not paying a lot. But then I think there's a lot of long-term worries, right? And we need to think about, and I don't know what is the right framework? Because what I don't want to say is you should never be able to give your product away for free. Because I think that's a tried and true way for startups, for maybe even large companies, to get something in the hands of users, to get it tested, to get it wanted to be used, right? And get the word out there, especially for a tool that might not have been used before. Before you even had email and it was just letters, you might have said, I'm not going to use this computer to send notes. And maybe once you use it, you see the power. So you do need the ability to do that, but we have to come up with a framework, right? Between short run and long run ability to do that, between how sticky a product is and how much you just get stuck doing it. I have a lot of worries around that.
Yeah, it's a really important point because we do hear about this all the time in federal sales. We have cooperative research and development agreements, or CRADAs. We have vendor demonstration agreements, or VDAs. Ben, you have a software company. I bet there have been times where you would love to put your software in the hands of a user to let them try it out, to give you feedback at a minimum, or even to show its value at a maximum. So we recognize there are use cases. I'll actually tell you a story. I spent a year negotiating with lawyers inside the Department of Defense to try to give away something for free, not even as a commercial entity, as a nonprofit. We were 501c3. We had a network of American expats who wanted to help advise desk officers in the Department of Defense, give them different perspectives. I won't talk about what the topics were, but perspectives from Americans who have a very different perspective. They don't live in this country anymore, but they're still American citizens. They're still loyal to the cause. It took us a year of negotiation with DoD lawyers about how to even engage them on this very limited basis. It was told to me many a time, it is easier to sell something to the government than it is to give it away. That's why you see $1. But I would imagine this may be challenged in federal court. It's not fair market value. It's not even approximating fair market value. The difference between your company, Ben, my nonprofit, or other startups, and OpenAI, a nearly $1 trillion company, or Anthropic, a 9-figure company, is that those are large, well-capitalized, market-mature organizations that have a very different kind of economic model. We have right now is venture dollars subsidizing these early use cases. This is not out of the good of their hearts. Let's be really clear. Let's be very, very clear, because today we've got a lot of hard questions we're going to discuss. We want to be really clear-eyed about this. This is not the goodness of Sam Altman's heart. This is not the goodness of Dario Amadei's heart. This is about business, Ben. This is about business.
Stickiness. This is about building stickiness, getting into the workflow, getting stuck in there. It makes sense. It is good business. And they've raised enough money where they can afford to subsidize this. And I don't fault them for trying. We just have to build in guardrails to make sure that the government is getting their data in the long run, that the government has the ability to switch.
There was one more take here that I think we got to call out, because this is for those of you who have maybe not encountered Nicholas Shallan. Nick Shallan was the Air Force Chief Technology Officer. He has a number of roles in government. This man is an absolute jalapeno factory on the LinkedIn platform. Nick pulls no punches. Sometimes I agree. A lot of the times I disagree. What you can guarantee yourself with a Nick Shallan post on LinkedIn is that there's going to be heavy engagement in the comments, and this thing's going to be passed around. True to form, Nick came out guns blazing. He's got a nice kind of French accent, so you're gonna have to imagine. I'm not going to imitate him saying, "There you have it." I can't do it. I could never do it. There you have. So he comes out. He says, "Look, if somebody is giving you something for free, this is about vendor lock." Spoiler alert: we're going to talk a little bit about vendor lock today. I think generally there is, given where the government has been and the desire to move towards these open architectures where systems are interchangeable, this is something that we should view with concern. Ben, where should we leave this? What is if you're sitting at home and you're seeing this story, what should you be thinking?
The question is, how do you balance the need for startups to get access? It is hard. You can't go as a brand new startup and say, well, my product's going to cost millions of dollars. You can work to that. And we need to create a structure that doesn't just benefit large incumbents now like OpenAI. And it is funny that OpenAI we now think of as an incumbent, but they are, right? In many ways, they are the leader. We can't let leaders take advantage of things that are meant for get fair competition from startups. We need a place that allows startups to compete on quality of product. Eventually, in the long run, compete on price. Let's go toe-to-toe with OpenAI if you're a startup. But it can't be that OpenAI is just using their large size to falsely subsidize the price and then jack up the price later to the government.
Yeah, so just to lay out here the alternatives, right? One, the government could have on-prem self-hosted models. They could use open source solutions. They could be from OpenAI. They could be Llama. They could be basically publicly available open source models that the government hosts themselves. That's one option. Another option would be the government has sort of like what we saw with the Jedi cloud procurement, where the idea was to initially get one cloud provider for everything DoD. It was challenged in court. Ultimately, they went to a hybrid model. So multiple cloud providers so that you had redundancy. I think we're probably going to see something similar here. It'd be very, very surprising to me if only one of these AI providers was ultimately made the sole beneficiary. By the way, we're not even talking about XAI. We're not even talking about Elon, who has gone from number one to we don't talk about Elon in Washington anymore. So that's kind of another option. And then the third option, which we should talk about because it's certainly happening in China, people have talked about it here in the US, is that the government could develop its own models. We're not seeing that right now. That's not, at least in terms of foundational models like a ChatGPT or like a Claude, but that is another option here. So those are the tools that the government has in its toolkit, and we're going to have to see kind of how this plays out.
Before we go, remember one lyrics from Welcome to the Hotel California. Insert the song rights that we don't have here. Welcome to the Hotel California. Let's talk to our lawyers about getting fair use and getting to do songs in future episodes. But, welcome to the Hotel California. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. So let's hope the government is able to leave some of these deals if they need to.
So Ben, speaking of vendor lock, I want to talk about the absolute behemoth, not just of the defense industry, but one of the hottest stocks, if not the hottest stock on planet Earth. Jim Cramer comes in this week. He says, Palantir is undervalued, baby. Palantir absolute to the moon. We've got another tweet here from, I'm not even going to read this dude's username. Palantir crosses 600 price to earnings multiple. It has earned almost $500 billion market cap on $500 million yearly net income. These guys, you can't be short Palantir, Ben. There are no shorts left.
Sometimes you got to do the opposite of what Jim Cramer says.
Absolutely. So reverse Cramer is the top in. Well, let's talk about that because it is very hard right now to find a Palantir skeptic. That said, I am very excited to welcome to the program. We found just such a person, and it's maybe not for the reasons you'd expect. Excited, Brad Glasco. U.S. Air Force veteran, 35 years of federal service on both the military and civilian side. He's lots of and continued service in the private sector. Brad had a fascinating post and argument this week that ties into exactly what we were just talking about, Ben, around vendor lock. Brad, thanks so much for joining us on the Steam Zone. It's great to have you, sir.
Hey, thanks so much, Noah. I really do appreciate it. Can you hear me okay?
We got you loud and clear, sir.
Awesome.
Hey, so Brad, lay it out for us. In this, folks are frothing at the mouth to buy more Palantir. They're slamming the buy button. Talk us through your argument here. What is giving you pause?
Well, to be quite honest with you, it gives me a lot of pause. And as you said, I've been in this industry for about 35 years. I'm an engineer by trade. And I've been involved in numerous very large Department of Defense programs. And I'm not a real big fan of how, the Department of Defense does technologies. A lot of times, we do things backwards and we don't think things out very well. And I kind of feel that we're going down the same pathway here as well. Palantir, I'm not against Palantir at all. I think that for the application of what you purchase it for, it's a great capability. But how we're going all in with this technology, specifically around the Air Force and in the Navy and the Marine Corps and Army, I think that we're putting ourselves a little bit at risk. They're viewing it as a one-size-fits-all kind of tool, something that's going to be the be-all, end-all solution that's going to fix all of our mission ailments. And that's not necessarily the case. And what we're actually finding, from a practical application is that the more that we go in with this capability, the more segmented our mission gets because we don't actually have access to the data that we need to do our jobs. There are so many legacy platforms and applications that we're supposed to integrate with, but no one's looking at the fact that we're not dissecting the mission processes and the jobs that the airmen are doing every day. All we want to do is siphon up all the data and put it into Palantir. Well, then what? What's next? Where do we go from there?
Taking a step back, can you just, for the listeners who don't know how all this government contracting works, what was this big agreement? And just take us through what your interpretation of it is, just overall, so we understand how it works.
So the overall aspect, if anybody's been in, defense contracting for very long, it takes 3 to 4 to 5 years to actually pursue a very large enterprise deal. Once the enterprise deal is won, regardless of what the technology is, it takes 1.5 to 2 years to 3 years to even begin implementation. And before you actually get the implementation completed, because everything is so complex, sometimes it can be 10 years. We've got programs that have been purchased that are going on 13 years. They've spent billions of dollars, and we haven't even rolled out the first capability to the user yet. So I see us going in and making a big, what I would call a big bet, a $10 billion contract by the Army. And I like the fact that they're consolidating contracts. They're bringing efficiencies to procurement, and we're bringing in cost savings for the taxpayers. But at what cost is it in the long run? Because again, you got to think about it. They're not removing the bureaucracy. They're not streamlining how we implement the capabilities. They're just saying we're going to purchase this capability for all intents and purposes almost on a sole source basis. There wasn't a competitive procurement for this. They awarded it to Palantir and Palantir only, and they're locked in. I've been selling technology to the government for at least 20 years now, and I was a 15-year consumer of it prior to that. And from the confines of that, every time you talk to someone about some type of technology, it's always about vendor lock. Well, we can't get vendor lock. Let's step back. We can't get vendor lock. Well, this is this is a perfect example of vendor lock. It's what it is.
They've agreed to this 10-year, $10 billion contract. The Air Force is definitely going to spend that $10 billion, or they have to. It's like task orders that they can order against it.
It's the Army and
the Army. Yep.
It's task orders. It's IDIQ style of contract. It's for all intents and purposes like an enterprise license agreement. They don't shell out the $1 billion, but if you look at the history of the purchases and you look at how much has been spent thus far with Palantir, they'll go through that $10 billion pretty quick.
Brad, so here's I think, we're talking today about some hard questions and some hard choices. And one of the things that you hear from the venture financing community all the time is, hey, look, we've showed up, we've basically allowed the Department of Defense to outsource a lot of their research and development, their R&D to the private sector. And the way that we've done that is we, the venture community, have subsidized that work. We've placed bets on companies. We've spent money ahead of the government to help mature those companies and those capabilities. That only works if the government then, what they would call, picks some winners, as you said, makes big bets, pushes their chips all in on one of those companies, right? So that they can get what they would venture returns. They're not looking for 6 companies that each make, 10 to 100 million. They want a couple of big winners that can make, and again, that's not what the American taxpayer may say. That's what the venture community is saying. So in this case, right, you've got, now Palantir is a public company, but I think there's a lot of folks on the venture side who would say we actually need more of this consolidation of picking a provider and a capability. How do you weigh that? How does that consideration play for you, vice the concerns of the American taxpayer and the warfighter? Is there any alignment there at all?
Well, there is, and you got to look at it from an innovative perspective. And I agree with a lot of the things that are going on today. It's just that, it's my concerns around where this is headed and how the decisions are being made. They don't necessarily align with historical norms. The venture capitalists and the organizations that are investing in these companies that are creating new tech, they're getting noticed and they're getting out there in prime time. But actually, activities like this will effectively push some of these smaller players out. If you think about it, they're not going to be given the opportunity because the Department of Defense, and I'll say it from a broader context, not specifically picking on the Army or any specific entity, but the Department of Defense looks like they're doubling down that our analytic capability is going to be no one but Palantir.
So that's basically Palantir is crowding out kind of the other newcomers is the reason.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks for taking us through your perspective. Easy to read a top line head number, harder to think about kind of what the details are.
So Brad, maybe walk us through, like, based on where we are today. I think your point is clear. Hey, we need to take a step back. We need to ask some questions. What options are available, do you think, to the government at this point? What are the different paths that the Army or that big DoD could pursue at this point?
Well, if I'm not going to sit here and say that the Department of Defense can build a better widget than Palantir can. I'm not going to state that. But I'm also not going to ignore the fact that the Department of Defense already owns a lot of the tools in their arsenal to create the capability that Palantir is going to provide them in a black box. And it's comprised of multiple different partners that the Department of Defense has made a significant investment in, that all they have to do is knit the capability together with COTS-based products, not GOTS, but COTS-based products that could give them a similar type of functionality. And they would not be cemented into a singular solution provider that is already known to have extremely high prices, extremely high consulting costs. And, for all intents and purposes, if you decided that you wanted to pull one of those other COTS partners out, there are other partners at play that could replace that functionality, but you can't do that with a single player. You can't do that with a single solution. You're locked. There's no way to easily extract yourself. There's no easy way to extract your data because it's intertwined within that data backbone and the ontology so tightly that in order for them to extract, it's going to cost probably more than what they're spending today.
So commercial off the shelf versus government off the shelf, using other technologies, stitching them together to give the government a bit more control. It's thought-provoking stuff, Brad. I imagine you've, since putting this out there, you've probably gotten some people agreeing with you vehemently and a lot of people sniping at you and very upset with the take. I think, look, there is the important thing is that these conversations need to be had out in the open, that we understand the trade-offs and that the decisions are made in if not a transparent way during the decision-making process, that the logic and the trade-offs are accurately communicated, because we need to understand what we're getting here as American taxpayers.
Absolutely, and as I share with you today, it's really not coming from the perspective of I'm for or against. I have an opinion, but what gets me going down this pathway is asking the why. And when I can't get a solid answer back of explaining the why that makes sense, that makes me begin to have concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate you voicing those concerns, and we appreciate you putting them out there. Brad, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us here, and we hope to have you back again soon.
Hey, appreciate it, Noah. Thanks, Ben. Have a great night.
Take care, Brad.
Thanks for coming.
All right, Ben. So Brad's take is interesting. I think the vendor lock point, well made. It is worth mentioning he does work for Salesforce. Technically, something of a Palantir competitor, I think, in that sense. In our conversation, he made clear it's like, hey, look, he wouldn't be saying this. He's not saying give it all to Salesforce. It's really that approach to, as somebody who has been on both sides of this, there's always risk when you get behind one vendor. What did you make of his take?
Yeah, I think an important piece that we really need to highlight is this is an IDIQ, right? Effectively, this is not an obligation for the Air Force to spend that money. This is the opportunity to do so. So consolidating all of this onto one vehicle might make it easier to do so, which might make it more likely to do so. But Palantir has to deliver products that the government wants if they're going to buy it. They're not obligated to.
I think Palantir has certainly proven their ability to deliver products that the government wants, but we will stay tuned and see what the Army does here. All right, let's go ahead and close that tab.
All right, moving on to currently great companies to maybe some companies that aren't doing as hot. Noah, explain to me what's going on with the non-Palantirs of the world, but still maybe important tech companies.
Yeah, so there was once this small company called Intel, Ben. And Intel, once upon a time, was one of the great chip makers and technology companies in these United States of America. This week, President Trump called for the ouster of Intel's CEO. This follows Senator Tom Cotton sending a letter requesting an investigation into that CEO. Why? Because the Chinese-American CEO has made over $200 million of investments into Chinese advanced manufacturing and chip firms. Now, he claims there's no conflict of interest. The administration is saying he is highly conflicted. This is problematic, Ben, and there's layers to this thing. It's not black and white. Break this down for us. What do you see in this story?
Yeah, I think this is distinctly different than the last China scandal we discussed with Microsoft having those personnel over, in China. This is complicated. Like you said, it's a gray area. We want really, really smart people, wherever they're from, working at our best companies, right? And America's strength is that we do. But we also have to have rule of law. We have to be careful about leaking national secrets to other countries, especially important things like chips. So I think, like many things, the details matter here about like what actually is happening, what information rights people have, right? Just because you invest doesn't mean you get information rights. And so that a lot of those details can really influence, I think, how this will shake out in terms of what information may or may not have gotten to other entities. And just because that information gets to the Chinese government, Chinese military, they've got spies in companies, I'm sure, that are completely American owned, and don't have any ties internationally. Like they are an adversary who is trying to get information, and that means we got to protect it. But just because they get it doesn't mean someone at the top made the decision that they could.
Yeah, so Reuters reporting on this is interesting, right? There's allegations that he actually was the CEO of a company that sold software to a Chinese military university that was simulating nuclear explosions. Now, it's not clear if he sold the software that simulates those explosions or if the university was just working on that as well as other projects. Here's the thing. I haven't yet seen, Ben, any allegations that anything that this CEO did was actually against American law. I think we just have a case of optics, and the optics here are not good, right? We have a Chinese American citizen who is, this is the cash flow in the other way. This isn't about getting information rights in American companies to bring it back to China. This is about a Chinese American investing to support the development, theoretically, of semiconductors and advanced manufacturing back in China. And so, I mean, this has been over a decade. This isn't recent. But having that person at the helm of not just a company, but Intel, a company that's trying to revitalize its advanced manufacturing and semiconductor industry practices here in the U.S., that is tough. I think you pointed at something. I want to say this explicitly, very, very clear. So much of the AI talent in the world is coming out of China today. We cannot, as the United States, afford to say, hey, we're not going to have Chinese Americans working in AI companies. I mean, it's really outlandish, right? We actually want the brain drain to flow in this direction. So especially American citizens, we need to be able to have those folks work in our companies, work for the betterment of this country, and many of them are loyal, patriotic Americans. I don't want to, let's not get this twisted. This particular entanglement and set of entanglements is just one of these very hard, thorny issues. I don't know that the Intel CEO is going to be able to survive this just because the optics are what they are right now. It does not look good. But certainly, this is not the end of this saga. And as tensions continue to increase with China, we're going to see more of this sort of thing, unfortunately, not less. And so we as a country need to figure out how to both safeguard our national security interests and, crucially, because these are two sides of the same coin, ensure that the best talent in the world, can work here. And there is some precedent for this historically, right, Ben?
Yeah, I think we have to figure out ways to make clear guidelines so that it's not about, it's not about perception. It's about what is realistically happening and how do we create guardrails so that you can follow it with good intent. And that, I bought this iPhone somewhere there in this chain. I'm benefiting someone in China, right? So we're all part of that in a sense, in sending cash over to China. Obviously, different investing 200 million than buying an iPhone. But I think it's something in the perspective that we have to have of like, where is that line and how does that change? iPhone at the bottom, $200 million at the top. Somewhere in there is a line maybe that we can make clear.
Yeah, it can't be a case of moving the goalposts. The norms were very different in 2013 than they are today in 2025. I think we will leave it there. Let's go ahead and close that tab.
Last week we were all about how the San Antonio Spurs and our favorite maybe NBA player now is all about nuclear abundance. So let's stick on that theme. Tell me more about some nuclear stuff.
Oh baby, nuclear. This show, they should call this show the Nuclear Wasteland, man. I feel like nuclear is our number one topic here at the Steam Zone. Another week, another nuclear headline. This week, the current Secretary of Transportation come acting administrator of NASA, Sean Duffy, had a press conference in which he announced some pretty big nuclear news. Let's take a listen.
But we are in the race. We're in a race to the moon, in a race with China to the moon. And to have a base on the moon, we need energy. And some of the key locations on the moon, we're going to get solar power. But this fission technology is critically important. And so we've spent hundreds of $millions studying, can we do it? We are now going to move beyond studying, and we have given direction to go, let's start to deploy our technology to move to actually make this a reality.
So do we ever need For All Mankind fans on this show? Because I'm getting excited about the space race again.
The space race, we're in a race to the moon. The technology he's talking about, Ben, nuclear technology. We are putting a nuclear energy plant on the moon. Now, I don't know about you. My mind starts racing, right? Because I imagine if you're in the nuclear business or you're in the space launch business, you got to be thinking, well, okay, are we transporting a microreactor? Are we going to build the thing on the moon? Like, what are all the considerations that we now need to figure out?
Yeah, I think like let's take this from like the whole value chain of getting this to happen, right? So we need to assemble some stuff on Earth, right? Who's going to do that? There are going to be some companies bidding, doing that work. Then we got to launch it. Is that SpaceX? Is that Blue Origin? A new company we don't know yet. They're going to get it maybe into orbit. Maybe we do some assembly out of orbit, right? And then we ship it to the moon. Then we got to bring it down to the moon. We got to assemble some stuff there. We got to turn on this nuclear reactor. So there's going to be some costs just to get there. And then, hey, our favorite thing, Palantir, we're all in it, sustainment dollars, right? Who's going to make sure the system's working? So you're going to have nuclear engineers on site just constantly checking in. So the services contracts are going to be pretty wild too. So there's a lot of work that needs to get done. The nuts and bolts to make this happen are going to be pretty wild. And I think we're far away from that, but I'm excited to see it happen maybe.
It's going to be a lot of money. It's going to be a lot of time. We'll see. But, you know, Ben, like it's hard to not be excited about it. Hey, America is committing to doing some hard stuff again. That's where we're at. This is not easy. Putting a nuclear reactor on the moon. I mean, we put it on a submarine. So what's really that different from deep water and the lunar surface? I am excited to see this one play out. What's your over-under? $100 billion to put this thing on the moon? What do you think?
I think we're talking more in the trillions. Can I place that on Polymarket?
Trillions. Ben is hammering the over. He's going for $1 trillion to get an operational nuclear reactor on the moon. Oh, goodness gracious. I hope that is...
We're going to start the Steam Zone Polymarket channel, right? The All-In guys have that.
I think that is an insane prediction. I think it's going to be way under, but let's close that tab. All right, Ben, take us into another one of our favorite topics here on the Steam Zone. We got another talent take this week. What are the people saying about the talented human beings of this country?
Yeah, I think this is something that's deeply personal to me. I think about my life has been a struggle between these poles of being pulled to work in these kind of what our society regards. In some ways, I definitely do too. I understand that pull of these quote unquote elite things, right? So I have felt the pull throughout my career to, when I'm in school, everyone's getting into banking or consulting, and that's where all the best students are. That's where all the best math minds are. You're not solving important engineering problems. That isn't cool anymore, right? We've talked about being abstracted away from doing work. It's cooler to do strategy. It's cooler to build a financial model than to actually build something. And I've felt that, right? Luckily, I found the Marine Corps and got away from that for a little. And then I fell back into it, right? I got an MBA and spent a few years back in the abstraction world, back in the management consulting world. So this is, I have felt that pull, and I'm not saying I'm brilliant, but I've been around some brilliant minds and in some rooms where they're recruiting, and I have felt that pull. It is strong, right? It is not just the money. It is the money, but it is the status. It's the recognition that when you're talking to other people from those elite circles, they will really understand when you say, I'm working at this big bank, or I'm working at this big firm, or I'm at this private equity shop. And there's an immediate recognition that you are a smart person. You might be doing something important. There is that feel to it. I totally recommend, but not recommend. I totally understand it. But man, if you go into those same room and you say, I'm going to work on a company and we're going to try and make crop yields more efficient, like this guy's saying, or I want to go make the next factory. that's a new factory that uses AI technology. All the companies that we see when we're talking about reindustrialize, right? Throughout my life, until movements in the last few years, that hasn't been cool, right? I think it would get sneered and looked down upon. And so it is something that I think is bad, right? It's something that I wish I had. I gained a lot from my experiences, but I wish I'd had a little more of that mind earlier in my life. So something I feel totally, not only do I judge, I can laugh at the tweet here, but have felt that throughout my career.
I think it's fair. I think it's fair. There's, you see, I talked to a lot of folks through our work with defense tech jobs. We talk to a lot of people who, they leave the mission, they're transitioning military or something like that. They go try big tech or finance for a couple of years, and they come back because they miss it. They miss that sense of purpose. And I think we're in a moment of high agency and high purpose in the United States. So the good news is I think good guys are winning. I think we're seeing a lot of momentum especially among young people, to go do hard stuff.
But the question remains, how do we keep a system? I don't want to come in here and say, oh, we have to regulate finance such that no one wants to work there. But what levers do we have beyond just us talking about it? Maybe that's the answer. I don't know. That doesn't feel that great to actually get talent to work somewhere, right? You have to incentivize them. We're going to have to make sure we have the benefits of working on some of these important issues that flow to the people that do it. Otherwise, everyone's just going to go work in finance or consulting or private equity, etc. So how do we? I don't have a good answer there, but I think it's something we need to think about long and hard as we build a society, as we build a country.
You're doing it right here. You're doing it right now. Work with cool guys like Ben. You could cut your sleeves off and go to work building software for the mission of national defense. You can get down to Texas and you can build factories that are powering the future of American defense. You can do cool stuff. That's what it's all about. Now, we are not Elizabeth Warrening our way out of people working in finance. We're going to go ahead and let folks should develop those skills and then apply them to great missions. And I think there's a lot of good stuff to go around. Let's go ahead and close this one out, Ben. All right. I want to hit on one more topic here before we let Professor Ben rip on us again, and that is this question of autonomy. Ben, this is one that I'm sure you hear it all the time too, the discussion around humans in the loop of autonomous systems. So there was some coverage here in Defense One this week. General Gainey, the head of U.S. Army Space and Missile Defense Command, he basically makes this point that drone defenses are going to need to kind of act first and ask later. We're not going to be able to react to drone swarms with a human with their hand on a joystick. We're going to have to move maybe a little bit faster than we anticipated to fully autonomous systems, or systems without a human in a loop. Maybe it means humans supervising, but they're certainly not going to be steering each and every system. And that could be, I understand why that's kind of off-putting to some people. I get kind of this, nobody wants robots' revenge, certainly not me. But look, I think you got to look at this as at the opportunity cost, right? Like how many soldiers' lives are we willing to put at risk to have a hand on a joystick, right? These systems they're being developed. They've been developed for years. We're getting better. We're developing more of them today. I think we've got to get to the point where we as a society understand that, yes, there is some risk in employing these autonomous systems, but there's a hell of a lot more risk in standing on principle of these kind of like overly fearful approaches to this philosophy that if a human doesn't have its hand on the stick, that we have somehow crossed some horrific Rubicon. I think we're pretty much there. So I don't know, Ben. I'm an optimist about fully autonomous systems for certain mission sets, like pretty quickly. You've been in the field. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think the training back to some of the Marine Corps 101 training, I think of two things, right? I think of first, hey, mission accomplishment. That is the most important thing. And then close behind, but second, is troop welfare, right? So when we think about mission accomplishment, is autonomy, does this help us get better at doing the job, faster at doing the job, or cheaper? Those are all good things. And then secondly, hey, can we, by using this, make our troops better? Can we use fewer troops? Can we save a life by not even having someone out there? Those are the framework that I think about. And I think an important metric to keep in mind as part of that is, listen, we cannot expect AI, autonomy, all of these buzzwords of robots to be better than humans. We can expect them to be better, to be perfect. We should expect them to be better. And that's the metric, is if you are going against perfection, yeah, they're going to fail. But we know humans aren't perfect. I certainly am not. I just made an error right there when speaking. And so the measure has to be, did the robot, did the autonomous thing, did the AI beat us? Not, did it do perfect?
No robots revenge, but slightly better than the worst human. Hopefully slightly better than the best human. That's really what we're shooting for, right? Slightly better than the best human. All right, Ben, let's go ahead and close that one out. All right, everybody. We are back by popular demand. People love math. People love a professor. We got Professor Ben back in the house. Professor, what are we learning today?
So last time when we started, we looked small. We looked at one VC investing in one company. Let's think about the whole market. Now we're going to look at the DoD budget. I don't want to hear hate in the comments. You can do enacted, you could do authorized, you could do appropriated, you could do actual dollars spent, and we know the DoD hasn't passed an audit in a while, so no one actually knows. So let's just be directional, no complaints, and until the DoD passes an audit, none of you actually know if this is right or not. So let's dig in. $824 billion, give or take, was the fiscal year 2024 budget. Let's dive into that. What can you actually win? If you're a startup, if you're a new hardware company, you're a Saronic, you're an Anduril, maybe you're a Havoc, you're someone trying to win DoD dollars. Okay, let's go in. Fiscal year 2024, DoD budget. Let's dive into these columns. Hey, what's that big one? We call this operations and maintenance, O&M. That's about $287 billion. That is a lot of money. Let's dive into what that actually means. That's the day-to-day running of stuff, right? Training, fuel, spare parts, some IT services that support it, all the base operations, right? Keeping your aircraft mission ready, making stuff happen. Then we got military personnel. Well, who makes that stuff happen? You got to pay the troops. You got to give them benefits. You got to give them allowances. That's for everybody. You need the people. We're not human. We're not autonomy yet. We'll talk about that later. So, or did we already talk about that? Hey, we're talking about it constantly on this show. Procurement. Procurement is important. You got to buy weapon systems. You got to buy vehicles. You got to buy aircrafts. You got to buy ships. Whether they're autonomous or not, you got to buy them. And this is where this happens. $172 billion. You have RDT&E dollars, right? This is where we're all playing with AFWorks, your SIBRs, your SDTRs, all sorts of RDT&E dollars. You're doing your pilots, developing and testing future capabilities. It's a lot of fun to play here, but we'll get into why that's not a long-term strategy. And then important stuff, right? You have your military construction. We got to build our bases, right? We got to build housing for the families of service members. New barracks. We all like to complain about barracks, so you got to spend money here if you're going to make them nice. And then lastly, other, not that much fun. We'll get into it, but some weird other accounts, working capital funds. No one wants to spend time there talking about the details there for something that's so small.
I think other is just Alex Karp's annual year-end bonus at this point.
No comments there. We're going to focus on where we can target as a startup community, right? So we've got our different categories, right? We talked about them. We looked through them, different percents. That's great. Let's go through each one, right? We talked about it briefly, but we're not hearing a lot of startups innovating how we're paying our people. They're not changing benefits until they completely replace all of us with robots. So that's not really a target for startups, right? We'll come back to these, but RDT&E, yes, they are a short-term target. I get it, but we know that's not recurring. You're going to play there. That's going to be great for your revenue initially, but it is not recurring and you know it. So don't play there in the long run. That's not an actual TAM when we think about the long-term selling of companies. I have yet to hear a startup innovate. I would love to. My Marines would have loved to see an innovation in the barracks, but we're not seeing anyone play around in Milcon right now. Let's be honest. And other, we're agreeing not to talk about other. And so let's not talk about that. But don't worry, we'll make these numbers big. Let's dive into O&M. Let's dive into procurement. We talked about O&M. It's the day-to-day running of the force. Absolutely, software has a role to play here. And so does hardware. Hardware and software, but startups more importantly. And then you've got your procurement dollars. We are buying cool new stuff. Absolutely, startups want to be paying here. But let's break in. We're going to add the 287 and the 172 together. We're going to do some math. All right? When we do the math, we get to 287, right? We get $459 billion. Well, how do we break that up into ways we can think about that as people who are going to try and win these dollars, right? Consume these dollars. I'm thinking about 4 categories, and I use past data to come up with the percentages here. So again, don't get on me if you disagree in the comments. I don't want to hear if it's not 20, it's 25. No one cares. This is directional math. We're doing consulting math here. We're not doing science. Okay.
Case studies
Stop
for Bane,
complaining.
baby.
Sunset, right? We're getting rid of some programs. Hey, we don't need the World War II planes anymore. We're sunsetting them. We're still spending a little on them, but they're going away. No startup is tackling that. Come on, be serious. Wipe it out. 92 billion. Recompetes. Hey, something was really good. We're continuing buying it. But hey, you got a contract only for 10 years. We got another 10. You are going to recompete it. We know this is where the primes are going to be playing really strong. That's 30%. That's 146 billion. We're going to have a whole bunch of new starts, right? These are the programs we're all excited about. Hey, Replicator, all this cool new AI stuff, autonomy, hardware, software. Everyone's playing in the new starts. That's 25%. That's 122 billion. Conveniently, another 25%, which say math, 122 billion. Is this unknown new? There's going to be stuff we cannot predict, but it's going to be created, right? All you startups the DoD doesn't even know they want my technology. This is where you're playing. All right, let's dive into these one by one. Let's go to the recompetes, right? Let's start out 146 billion, right? I am being very generous to startups here, and I'm going to say only 60% are going to be 100% run by the primes, right? So that leaves us with $58 billion that we can target, addressable. And let's say new startups and the primes, they're going to do their best, only win 50%. That's 29 billion. Let's keep a little tracker going. Okay, Noah, we're going to track this. $29 billion is our total market. Let's keep going. Let's go to new starts, right? These are the programs we know are coming. They're exciting. They're new. Another 122 billion. Hey, let's say startups can play in all of that, right? It's new stuff. Anyone can win it. $122 billion addressable. Let's say this is crazy, but let's go big. Let's say 80% of it can be captured by startups. 97, 98 billion. The dream of the DoD, defense industrial base, excited people we're capturing 80%. All right, let's add that together. We're at $126 billion. Let's keep it moving. Now, we got to talk about these unknown news, right? How are we getting these? You're going to go through a gauntlet to get there, right? You're going to get Congress to authorize it in the NDAA. You're going to get Congress to fund it in the appropriations. And guess what? Each of those is going to have their own page on the controller, on the DoD website, on the Senate website. So when I'm trying to build numbers for charts like these, it's going to screw me up because there's going to be all sorts of numbers. Again, I don't want to hear complaints. And then also, you got to work with the Pentagon. When we think about working with the Pentagon, you either need a new program office to be created. Good luck doing that. Or you need to work with an existing one and make sure they adopt it as a priority. So a lot has to happen for these unknown news. But let's say you get through all of that, right? Let's do the math there. 122 billion. Let's say all of that, of course, is addressable by startups. Let's say they get 90%, right? The dreams are alive. Everyone wins. 90%. That's 109 billion. Our tracker's at 236. Okay. So our new kind of service, our SAM we're using, I don't want to get in trouble with my old managers. The service obtainable market here is $236 billion. Okay. I was extremely generous, right? I ignored a lot of program risk. I assumed almost these perfect win rates. I counted only some of these targetable buckets. That's the pile of money we're chasing. Let's have it. Let's say it's 115 billion. That's still pretty impressive. The question is, Noah, do you believe in this market at that number?
It's a massive, massive number. That's bigger than many of the venture-backed markets in not only the United States but the world. Have at it. The alternative, Ben, would be you and I deciding that we're somewhat, for some reason, more sophisticated or more intelligent than hundreds of very sophisticated investors, and we would never assert such a thing. So hell yeah, let's get after it.
Yeah, Noah, you heard it here first. He's starting. LPs, wire your checks. Scheinbaum VCs are starting. So even if our numbers are just a couple decimal places off, you're going to be a winner.
All right, it will never cease to amaze me just how complex the federal government acquisition structures are. Ben made it so understandable. Ben, thank you for that. eloquent explanation of programs of record and for breaking down Tam Sam Som for us there. I think lots of companies and probably some investors can learn a thing or two from Professor Ben. All right, Ben, you know what time it is. It's time.
Yeah, let's do it.
Choo-choo, baby. It's time to blow off some steam. What do you got for us?
I got a good one this week. I think it might be a little niche, but it's important to me. Can we cancel the pre-read? Let's be honest. We're all sending pre-reads ahead of our meetings, whether that's with my government customers, whether that's in my previous career as a management consultant, whether that's back when I was a Marine briefing generals. Everyone expects a pre-read. Let's be honest. I can't do a live poll here. No one is reading the pre-reads. It's only the weirdos like me that are actually reading the pre-read. Let's be honest. Because every time I'm briefing anyone, they've act like they've never seen the slides before. So can we just end the charade of the pre-read? Let's stop it. It's giving me more homework. I got to make a separate deck to do the pre-read deck, and it's not going to have all the slides because I want to leave something new for you when you come to the meeting. So now I have 2 decks I have to track. Version control is out of control. So let's just cancel the pre-read. Let's all agree, no more pre-reads. That's my hope for the week.
Namaste, brother. I got one for you, Ben, and you're gonna hate this, but I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm not a huge media guy. All right, I try to get a steady diet of social media inside my brain, so I don't read too much real media. That's kind of the way I work. It's dark out there, man. But I will tell you, there was an article that caught my eye, and I put on a little Rolling Stones, and I just thought, I was like, man, we got some real sympathy for the devil going on in this country right now, my friend. There is just a fascinating thread. I call it the wickedification of American culture. Brought me back this past winter. I went to see this movie Wicked with my family. I think it was probably over Christmas, over New Year. And I will tell you, man, it's just so... I don't care about the singing and the acting, and this isn't a cultural piece. It's just so interesting to me the way that right now the easiest story to write is to take the side of the good person and make them the bad person. It's very easy. And so there was an article I was reading this week, and maybe you saw it, Ben. It's been certainly on the timeline. The Associated Press, the AP, put out something about the poor Hezbollah fighter who couldn't rejoin Hezbollah because of the Israeli beeper attack. And now look, we're not going to Israel, Palestine on this, not on this show. There's about 700 others you can read. But the sympathy for the poor Hezbollah fighter, an organization which, mind you, has been declared a terrorist organization by the United States, I think since 1997, bombed the U.S. Embassy, the American and French barracks in Beirut in 1983, assassinated the country's prime minister, Rafik Hariri, in 2005. Generally not seen as super... constructive forces for good. We're now expressing the horror at the fact that this poor soul was injured in a highly targeted Israeli attack. I get it. There's a lot of anger about what's going on in the situation in the Middle East, and it's horrible all around. War is not a pleasant thing. But it was a very, very eye-opening moment for me, Ben, of saying, I don't really want to watch Wicked again. I'm good. I like the original Wizard of Oz. I like Glinda the Good Witch. I like Dorothy. I like Judy Garland making it home in one piece. That's my story. I think we all could benefit from a little good and evil. Sometimes the good guys are just the good guys.
I don't know. I like Defying Gravity. That's a good song to listen to in the gym when you're just trying to finish a deadlift session.
All right. Well, we're gonna buy Ben an all-you-can-eat pass to modern remakes of Disney movies. I'm gonna watch the originals. Tell us who you want to watch in the comments. Thanks for joining us for another week on the Steam Zone. That's it for this week. Ben, we'll see you next week.